As you can probably tell, we have zero idea how to start this.
No. Well, interestingly, I've put cold open, and I haven't actually thought of a cold open. So maybe this should just be the cold open. And
Yeah, I think that would work. Yeah.
okay. And then next week, I promise I will. Well, I say next week. In a fortnight, I promise I will do a cold open.
Or maybe we won't. It's all a mystery. This is
Oh,
part of the fun.
suspense.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Come back next week to find out if I remember to do a cold open. Hey there, and welcome to Tabletop, the podcast where two friends get together and play a game. So, you're probably wondering who we are and why you're listening to this. Well, I'll begin. My name's David,
And I'm Keenan.
and we are good friends who have decided to start a podcast together. Or you could say a broadcast.
Because it's about board games.
Exactly. But why have we decided to do a podcast, Keenan?
What a great question. So we have become quite interested in board games. I think it's something that we've both always enjoyed. I always remember sitting around at Christmas playing a game of Scattergories, or the one where you have the pie thing and then you get hit in the face with whipped cream. We all have fond memories of those. And I think sort of post lockdown, sort of getting used to being inside, it just sort of board games just sort of became a part of the evening routine. You know.
Wow, we couldn't leave the house, could we? So,
Well,
I,
yeah.
well, I know in my household we ordered quite a few board games, especially from Big Potato Games.
Pick up
He may pop up in the podcast in a later episode.
a bit of a teaser. Yeah, I think the one that really got me into buying board games was Micro Macro, which I'm sure will come up as well.
So the reason why we want to do a podcast or a broadcast, as Keenan is now insisting I say,
Broadcast, yeah. I'm prodding him
Broadcast.
as he every time he says podcast.
which is weird because we're not in the same room, but we live together. Explain that one.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the reason why we want to do a broadcast is because we feel like there are a lot of board games out there, a lot of card games, and knowing which ones to play and which ones not to play can be intimidating. An example of this is when we went to the board game cafe for the first time. Sounds great, but then you're met by 500 different games
And more.
and you're stood around a bit like an idiot, just staring at them as if you just don't know what's going on, as if it's another language.
Yeah. And we should also add that we are by no means board game experts. Okay.
Oh, absolutely not.
But our word is absolutely gospel. Everything that we say should go, and that's it.
Yes, which is why this is officially a broadcast.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like looking at a different language. So we sort of got together and we thought, why don't we play some games and then tell people about it, and then they can make a decision as to whether they want to buy the game or not buy the game. Coming from two guys who aren't really experts at board games,
But
just like
absolutely
playing
are.
them. Okay, yeah, okay. So we are experts, but we just like playing them.
We are broadcasters. That's how it goes.
Broadcasters.
Yeah.
Okay, right, let's call ourselves broadcasters. So you're probably listening to this thinking we're experts at board games, which we're not. And you're probably thinking, oh, they know how to do a podcast. Believe me, we don't know how to do a podcast.
We really don't. I will hold my hands up and say we really do not know how to do this.
Yeah, so this is the first time we're doing it. So if there are any technical difficulties or we sound absolutely awful, then my sincere apologies.
Yeah,
But that's how I
please-
sound, and I can't change my voice.
Yeah, please bear with us. Podcasts don't take our opinion or advice. Board games, yeah, I take our advice. I would say, yeah, as official broadcasters,
Official broadcasters.
Yeah,
Okay, note to self, we need to get a mug or a t-shirt that says official broadcasters.
official broadcasters. Yeah, look at that. Episode 1, already designing merch.
Speaking of merch, where can you buy merch? In a shop. Speaking of shops, where can you buy shops? Oh, only in the hit Japanese game, Machi Koro.
Machi Koro, what a great segue.
Thank you very much. So, tell us about the game, Keenan.
Yeah. So Machi Koro is it's a board game that was just it was designed in or was published rather. It was published in 2012 by Japanese games designer Makao Sugunuma. I believe I've pronounced that correctly. I apologise if I haven't. It was published by Grounding Inc. And it's basically kind of like Monopoly, but way more fun and also not as sort of long.
Hang
Uh,
on, you'll say Monopoly's not fun?
I can't remember the last time I had a good time playing Monopoly.
Yeah, spoiler alert, we may be talking about Monopoly later in the episode, so keep a lookout.
Keep an ear out.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Keep an ear out.
Keep an ear out. Yeah. So there's two versions of Machi Koro. Obviously, the first one was published in 2012, and the second one was published in 2021, so quite recent. And it takes a lot of the core mechanics of the old game and makes big changes to them. That's quite almost a it's quite a natural. Oh, that's not the right way to put it. It takes a lot of things from the old game and evolves them and just kind of makes it a bit more of a well-rounded game. But we'll get to that later on.
Yes, so we'll get to that later on in the episode. We have played both games, the original and the sequel, both of which we will be talking about in today's episode. So let's start with the first game. So as you said, it's a bit like Monopoly, but more fun.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we get with the game, Keenan? So we get some cards, we get some dice, and we get
Yep.
some coins.
You've nailed that one. Yeah, so you have a pack of cards. We should probably look how many cards are in it.
I'm going to guess it's 100 odd. I think it's 103. Right, I can tell you there is 108 cards.
108, that was pretty close. Okay, right. The basic principle of the game is you have 4 landmark cards, and you have to purchase them and in essence activate them. And once you've activated all 4 landmark cards, you've won. To do this, you have to buy establishments. So there's 3 types of establishments. You have red establishments, which are activated on your opponent's go. There are blue establishments, which are activated on everyone's go. And there are green establishments, which are activated on your go only. How do you activate the cards, David?
Well, to activate the cards, you need to roll the dice, and should the dice land on a number which corresponds to the number that is at the top of the card, you are able to activate that card and use the effect which the card has. Now, the effect for the card is located at the bottom of the card. So, for example, if we look at the starting cards, which everybody has at the beginning of the game, they start with the same cards. One of them is a wheat field with an activation cost of 1. So, if I was to roll the dice and it lands on the number 1, I am able to activate the card and use the effect, which in this case allows me to gain 1 coin from the bank on anyone's turn. Now, different cards have different activation numbers, and sometimes the activation number can be a number range. So a particular card could have an activation number of 5 to 6 or 11 to 12.
Yeah, so obviously you start with you have 2 starting cards, but there are other cards available, and they all vary in cost. So essentially, the more powerful the card actually is, the more it will cost. So if you're looking to purchase a card with a higher die number, that will typically cost you a little bit more. If it's a little bit of a sort of more rewarding card, so say something like the Wheatfield will give you 1 coin, but then something like the Mine, which is a die roll of 9 to activate, might give you 5 coins from the bank. That's going to cost a little bit more to purchase. It's essentially a game of strategy in the sense of you need to think about the cards that you want to buy and what you want to essentially invest in. So one of the things you can, one of the key strategies is maybe investing in sort of low number cards. So going all in on the 1s and the 2s, and then sort of like racking up your coins quite consistently but slowly because you're getting smaller amounts. And then you might think, well, I'm going to actually invest in the higher cards. So it's a bit less likely that you'll get those numbers, but the reward is obviously much sweeter.
Yeah, exactly, because some of those cards will have greater effects. So I believe one of the effects for a high activation cost card includes taking coins from the bank or taking coins from other players. And I believe there is one particular card which states you can take up to 3 coins per wheat field you have in your play area. So, say for example, you had 4 wheat cards in your play area. Potentially, you could finish the round with gaining 12 additional coins, depending if you manage to roll the dice to the corresponding activation cost.
Facts. Right, do you want to tell me a little bit of things that you like about the game, David?
Yeah, so my first impressions of the game when I first played it was that I actually liked the different strategies that you're able to use. So I believe one game that we did, I noticed that you were buying lots of mid-value cards, which what's so funny?
I am aware that one of the classic David blunders is going to be coming up in a minute, and that makes me happy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Continue.
I will continue. So yeah, one game we played, I noticed that Keenan was buying lots of mid-valued cards, and for Keenan to take full advantage of the effects, it required me to roll 2 dice, because obviously I cannot roll anything higher than a 6 using 1 dice.
Mm-hmm.
And the activation costs on his cards were, I think, between 6 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are 4 landmarks, each one costed more than the other, so the lowest one costs 4, and the highest cost 22 coins. Now, when I finally decided to buy a landmark, I thought I would be somewhat clever, a bit sneaky, and not purchase the landmark which costs 4. As had I purchased it, it would mean that I would be able to use 2 dice. But I decided to restrict myself to just using 1 in order to try and not allow Keenan to use his effects for when it was my turn, therefore putting him at a disadvantage. However, the blunder is I put all of my strategy into 1 number. Now, this is how not to play the game, people.
Lucky number 4.
Lucky number 4. So I bought a load of flower orchards. I think I must have bought about 5, and a lot of them didn't come up in the game.
Yeah. So obviously, it's all about investment, isn't it? You sort of, I think what I had in this game was I had a good spectrum of cards. So I basically had every number covered, minus 1 or 2. Whereas David, classic David blunder fashion, invested all his numbers, all of his sort of wealth into die number 4.
What I will say is, if you're going to go in, you go all in. All right, you
Yeah,
either go all in or you go home. And I
respect.
went all in on number 4.
I respect the strategy.
Did it pay off? Absolutely not.
No, you did lose. Yeah.
I did lose, but that was my first game, I believe.
But humble in victory, I always say.
And humble beginnings.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So another thing that I really like about the game is, depending on how many people you're playing with, you will be limited to the number of cards you can buy and use. So in the supply, there's only a set number of cards. So there's only a set number of wheat fields, for example. So if you're playing with more than 2 people, maybe like 4 or 5, those are going to go very quickly. So you will have to adapt your strategy and gameplay as you're going along.
Yeah, there's a lot of replayability to it, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly, and that's what we look for in a game. Like, you don't want to play one game and then that's it, done. There's different ways to play this game, and it's also luck. So you can't actually just blame it on someone having a good strategy. It is just luck of the dice.
Yeah, which is probably one of the things that probably a bit of a weakness of the game, is there is agency in the sense that you choose what you buy. You choose the cards that you want and that you go for, but at the same time, it is all dependent on the roll of the dice. You know, you can't do anything to alter that roll. I think some of the landmarks give you options like re-roll the dice, things like that. But again, that doesn't necessarily alter the outcome or guarantee you a better die roll. So that's probably one of the weaknesses of the game. It's a lot. It is a lot of luck.
Yeah. So in terms of luck, you may not. So one game that we played, Keenan had quite a few restaurant cards, and one of the effects of the restaurant cards is to steal coins from the other players.
Yeah.
Which sounds great. It sounds like a great strategy that you're going to do. However, as luck will have it, the other players may have no coins because they may have a limited number of coins, and they are, on each round that they're playing, they are spending all their coins. So Keenan was unable to use that card because I had no coins that he could steal.
Yeah. So luck is. I mean, obviously, it plays in both favors, doesn't it?
Yeah. And obviously, you had invested your money and coins into getting those cards in the hope that I would then have coins for you to steal, and that would hopefully build your landmarks quicker.
Yeah, exactly. There is a big reliance on luck in the game, which does detract from it a little bit in a way.
But I don't think it takes the fun away.
No, it's very fun. It's a very fun game.
It is. And if you do have the chance to play this game, because I'm going to skip a bit. I think we both recommend this game, do we not?
100%. Yeah, I'd recommend this game. I don't think it's that expensive either. Obviously, it's quite an old game. Been around for some 10 years now. I think you can probably find it for a fairly decent price in local board game shops, online, that sort of thing. Yeah, 100%. I'd recommend it. I also think it's quite a nice looking game. I think it's quite well done.
I mean, I don't think I've got OCD, but when I was buying my establishments and putting them in card order and the colours and matching them all up like my own little decks, there's something satisfying about it.
Yeah, it is. It is very satisfying. It is, and the cards do look nice. It's got quite a fun little cartoony style to it, which is a little bit fun. It's quite cute. Cute's the word I'd go for. Buying a little cafe and stealing money off other people. It's cute. It's cute.
Yeah, it's what we all strive for in life. Buy a cafe, steal money
off people. That's what I want to do.
Exactly, because I want to build a train station, and I want to build it now.
Exactly.
I think one point to make about this game is it's quite an easy game to understand. There's not much going on with it, and it's simply a case of rolling the die, either earning coins or spending coins to buy establishments, to then earn more coins to buy landmarks. Once you build 4 landmarks, you win the game. So from that perspective, it's very easy to get your head around, which is good because it means you can spend more time exploring different strategies rather than trying to understand a game, which can sometimes dampen the experience if you're spending half hour trying to get your head around what is going on. Whereas this game, you can simply pick up, spend 10 minutes looking at the instructions, know what's going on, and then you can, like I say, explore different strategies and have a really good gameplay session.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's good fun for all the family, you could say.
So, sponsorship time, except we don't have a sponsor because we're new. So, instead of bringing you some adverts, we're going to do a segment until we get sponsored. And the segment is going to be called Table Talker, which is a bit like Pillow Talk, but instead of talking to your pillow, one of us each week is going to come to the tabletop and discuss something that we want to get off our chest, board game related. So it could be a board game, it could be a card game, it could be a particular element of a game. But each week, one of us is going to speak for about 2 minutes or so to get something off our chest. And the first week is going to be Keenan. So, Keenan, what do you want to get off your chest?
There's this one game that's out there. It's quite a popular game.
Popular, you say?
Yeah, popular. I believe everyone knows about it. And I just want to say, before I say what the game is, it is never ending. There is so many versions of this one game that it's infuriating.
What game could it be?
It's everywhere. Walk into the shop, there's a Cheltenham version, an Isle of Wight version, a Cardiff version, there's a New York version, there's a Spider-Man version, there's a Marvel version, there's a DC version, there's an everything version, a kids version, a cheetah version.
So what is this game you speak of, Keenan?
It's Monopoly.
Monopoly? Who would have guessed?
Who would have guessed?
What don't you like about Monopoly, Keenan?
Monopoly. The fact that it's everywhere. I can't escape it. I want to. I'm going into a shop and I think, I'm going to have a look at the games. Maybe I'll pick up a new board game, and I'm just bombarded by Monopoly. It's like the walls are built of Monopoly. I truly believe that one day Monopoly will outlive us all.
So what you're saying is Monopoly is going to be the new Lego.
Yep.
Monopoly will outlive us all.
It's like a cockroach, indestructible.
Yeah. Here's a question: how many households do we think own a Monopoly set on average?
I actually don't know. We have one. We do. I should admit, I am guilty of that. I do have a Monopoly.
I think you've bought me a Monopoly.
I think I did buy a Monopoly, actually.
You did buy me a Monopoly.
That is because it was Toy Story, though. That wasn't because it was Monopoly. It was the novelty of it being Toy Story. So I've just Googled it, and I can confirm that over 250 million copies have been sold.
No way. Seriously?
150 million. Yeah.
Oh,
I know there's
Lord.
like 80 million people in the UK.
Yeah. But the worst thing
So
is, people are going to claim, oh yeah, I really like board games. So what board game do you play? Monopoly. That's not a board game.
yeah, no. Well, if judging by the math, I actually don't know how many people are in the UK. A lot.
A lot of people, yes, I think it's safe to say a lot of people in the UK.
So I think for, for about 70 million people in the UK. It says so for every one person there is 4 or 5 Monopoly games.
Well, there we go then. That is,
That's this week's Table Talker.
and I'm keeping this in, but I just want to say, I'm pretty sure I said 2 minutes.
There's not enough time to talk about how much we hate Monopoly.
Not enough time. Find out next week what we're going to be talking about. So we've spoken about the first game, but I hear there's a sequel out, Keenan.
Sure is. Machi Koro 2. Who'd have guessed it? Yeah, this one, I think we touched on earlier, was published in 2021 by the same designer, Macau Suganuma.
And it's also published by the same publisher.
By the same publisher, yeah. Grounding Inc. You are right. Yeah, so there's a lot of differences in this game to the first one. It's the same principle. You need to purchase landmarks in order to win. There's the same sort of establishment. So you've got your green cards, your blue cards, your red cards, purple cards, and they all function the same way. But what it feels to me, it's almost like an evolution of the first game.
Absolutely.
It takes a lot of what the first game did, builds upon it, and just kind of makes it better.
So, one of the differences with this game is the supply is not all available at the start of the game. Whereas the first game, you lay out the supply and you've got all of the establishments, all of the landmarks, and you pick what you want depending on what you want to purchase. The thing with this game is, it starts off with you have to create 3 different decks. So you get a 1 to 6 deck, which is all of the cards where the value of the roll is 1 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got a 7 to 12, and then you've got the landmarks.
Yep.
So what you do then is, instead of laying them all out, you shuffle each individual deck, and then you start unveiling them one at a time until there's 5 unique cards per deck available on the table, and this acts as the supply. Then they do a thing called the initial building round, which is not a trademark, but it should be. And there's 3 stages to this. So what you do, you each start with 5 coins again. However, you can only purchase the cards that are available at the start in the supply.
Yeah. So you don't have you don't start with 2 cards. There's not a set of starting cards. The cards you start with are the cards that you choose to purchase. So yeah, you have the initial 5 coins, and then you can choose to spend that however you wish.
Yeah, so you don't have to start with the lowest value cards. You can actually start with the highest one, but it might come back to haunt you. As another David Blunder we'll talk about later.
We do love a good David Blunder. There's at least 1 per game, so that'll be a sight to see or hear. A sight to hear.
A sight to hear, exactly, Keenan. Yeah, so each player does this until they've spent all of their coins. If they have no coins left to spend, then they'll have to pass that round. So in the 3 stages, so say I bought 2 cards in the first 2 stages and I have no coins left, then when it comes to the 3rd stage, I can't buy any more cards because I obviously can't afford it.
Yeah, I think it's you go until you spend all your coins or until you have 3 cards. So you have you start with a maximum of 3, but you could start with a minimum of 1.
Yeah. And I think it's designed that you ideally start with 3 cards. Yeah, so once you've got your cards, then you obviously start the game. However, a difference from the first game is you immediately have access to both dice.
Yeah.
So whereas before in the first game, one of the landmarks you had to unlock, which was the cost of 4 coins, was that you may use 1 or 2 dice. In this game, all players start with both dice immediately.
Yeah. I think it's the same function. You may use 1 or 2, but they are both readily accessible to you at the start of the game, yeah.
Yeah, so say someone was to buy a higher activation cost card at the beginning of the game, which was available from the supply, Faye can now roll both dice in order to use that effect straight away instead of waiting
Yeah.
to unlock the landmark to roll 2 dice.
Yeah, exactly. Another key difference is in with the landmarks and how you actually win the game. So, in the first game, you each have 4 set landmarks. I think it's like the train station, the shopping mall, those sorts of things.
And they're the same for each player, aren't they?
Yeah, the same for each player. Yeah, in this game, I don't know how many landmarks there are, but there's a lot more than 4. I think there's like 6 or 7 unique landmarks, and in order to win, you only need to activate 3. Um, so obviously, as we explained, you have the 3 decks, and it's split into the 1 to 6, 7 to 12, and the landmarks. You buy landmarks from that supply of landmarks there, and once you've purchased 3 of them, that's when you win. And I think each landmark has they each have 3 different prices, and you pay the price according to the number of landmark that you are purchasing. So if it's your first time purchasing a landmark, you pay the first price. If it's the second landmark you're buying, you pay the second price. If it's the third landmark you're buying, and in essence winning the game, you pay the final third price, which typically is the most expensive of the 3. Um, yeah,
Yeah, but what this also means is one person potentially could have the same landmarks.
yeah,
So say there's an effect on a landmark, and we'll go into effects in a bit. That was a really good one, and the player was using to their advantage. They might keep buying that same card, but for a higher cost in order to win the game. Once we get to the third cost of 22 coins, for example.
Another difference with the landmarks is the way they function. So, in the old game, the effects of landmarks were personal to you, as we said explained before. Things like the ability to use 2 die, the ability to re-roll the die, those sorts of things. Whereas these landmarks could either affect you personally, they could be immediate effects, so only have one-time use, or they could be affects everyone indefinitely. So
Yeah, so I
that's
think one. Yeah, so I think one of the effects that happens to everyone every time it happens is I think when someone rolls a 5 or whatever it was, uh, or it's a certain. I think yeah, I think it was a certain dice roll. Everybody in the group would get a certain number of coins on the bank.
Yeah, so obviously yeah, exactly. So whilst you're helping yourself, you're also helping other people. So it could be detrimental to you. It could be really beneficial. Really depends how the game rolls out. I think one of them was something like if you don't buy any landmarks, then or purchase any establishments that round, you get 5 coins from the bank, something like that. Which obviously could be great for you, but also could also help the other person build up their income.
Exactly, and I think this is where we should talk about a David blunder.
Big old David Blunt. We
We
love
do
these.
love these. You'll get used to these. So when we was playing this version of the game, the second version, at the start I mentioned there was 3 stages, and ideally start with 3 cards. I started with 2 cards. Now one of them was you had to roll a 2, but the second card you had to roll, I believe it was an 11 or 12.
Yeah, it was quite a high number. Yeah.
It was a high number, but I was looking at the effect of the card, hoping because I think the effect was I would get 5 coins from the bank every time I got 11 or 12. Now, the odds of me actually getting either 11, 12, or even 2 for that matter is quite high. And so I was having to keep rolling and not being able to purchase any establishments. Now, what does this mean? Well, as Keenan was just explaining, for the landmarks, if the landmark that you got said you could, if you didn't get any establishment, then you could get 5 coins from the bank. I was having to do this, so I'm glad Keenan got that establishment because then it meant I could at least get coins every single round that I was playing.
Yeah, and I think that strategy is probably leads into one of the things I don't like about this version of the game is that it felt like it was a much slower start. Um,
Yeah, and I think the slower start is down to having to do the initial building round, which this game requires, which the last game didn't.
the David Blunder. It was down to David Blunder.
Okay, it's down. Yeah,
Down
okay,
to David
it's my
Blunder
it's my fault.
there. I think this game felt like it was slower because the options at the start are so much more broad. So in this case, he had a 2 and an 11. So he's either going to roll one die and go for the 2, or 2 die and go for the 11. In which case, it's quite a wide spread. Whereas in the other game, you're forced to start with one die, and you're forced. I think you have it's a 1 and a 2 that you start off with, and that's how it goes. So it's much more likely that you'll land on those numbers at the start. That was one of the things I felt. But then once you do hit your number, and the game starts to pick up a little bit, it really picks up, because things like I think the rewards and the benefits from some of the card effects were
felt a lot greater in this game.
yeah. So like in previous games, some of the cards carried over in name and artwork, and it was where in the last game they'd only give you 1 coin or 2 coins. In this game they were giving you 3 coins, 5 coins. So
yeah, and like we said, it feels like a more rounded game. It feels like an evolution of what the first game was, and I would hope it was, to be fair, considering it's been several years since the first game.
I thought the first one was it was pretty good. It was pretty well established. It made sense. It was easy to follow, and this one was exactly the same premise with a little bit of an interesting twist in the way the supply works, and kind of I think actually kind of made it a bit more engaging as well, because it wasn't so much like oh, I'm going to go all in on this one card. It was, oh, these are the cards I have available to me. These cards might not be available further down the line, because once I've taken the card and replaced it, it could be a whole new card.
Yeah, and I think also when you start the game, obviously the supply is limited depending on the luck of what cards you drew into the supply. So whereas the first game, each player starts with the same card, essentially, if you wanted to, you could copy what the other player does.
Yeah.
Whereas this game really forces you to do your own strategy, do your own game, how you want to play, which establishments you want to unlock first. And obviously, I don't think we mentioned with the first game as well, but the landmarks can be gained in any order.
Yeah, I think the first game, it was easy to fall into the sort of tunnel vision of just choosing one card and sticking with that. This game encourages you to sort of mix and match, because the same card might not be available to you.
Yeah, and if someone has a card that they use that you really want, that they've got from the supply, because every time a person takes a card from the supply, that card gets replaced with a new card. Now, it has to be a unique card. So you may not see that card that the person has brought for ages. And while you think that's a good card, whereas the first game, you would be able to, if you had enough coins, you could buy that same card. In this game, you may have to wait several turns in order to get that card.
Yeah, it just felt like it was a bit more engaging. And I think it took about the same amount of time to play, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I think my only downside with the game was, unlike the first game, there's quite a bit of setup.
There is quite a bit of setup, yeah. This is a very rare Keenan blunder. I just assumed that the game would be in essence the same, so I started shuffling all the decks together, and when I actually needed them to be separate. So the setup blunder is on me.
So I guess we should ask ourselves: would we? So we both recommend the first game.
Yeah.
Completely. Would you recommend this game?
Yes, absolutely.
I would, but I want to just put a caveat on it.
Mm-hmm.
I would only recommend it if you've played the first game multiple times and you feel confident in knowing what you're doing.
That's interesting. Why that? Why would you not recommend people go straight into this one?
Because I think this game asks a lot more from you. As I was saying earlier, with the first game, you both start with the same cards, so you're both on the same playing field, so to speak. Whereas this game, multiple players could be at different landmarks and have different strategies going on.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. In a way, the first game is easier, because you all start at the same place. You all start with the same 2 cards, with the 1 die available. But then in the other game, you all could choose to go down different paths, obviously, because the selection of cards available to you is different. I guess, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because the supply obviously is going to be different cards, because you don't have access to all of the cards in the supply to begin with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I would probably recommend this one over the other one.
Interesting.
I think there's a lot more variety in the gameplay, because of the fact that you can choose your starting avenue. You're not forced to start with the same cards, stick to the one die. There's a lot more variety in opening.
Okay, so here's a question. Does this game deserve the title of being the second installment of the game and not just a rehash of the first game or an expansion?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's the same game, isn't it? It's the same game, it's the same principle. It's just an evolution. It is Machi Koro 2. That's what this game is. It is the second installment of the Machi Koro series. 100% deserves the title of 2 because it is that game, bigger, better, more well-rounded.
Yes, I would agree with what you've just said, but I think it's worth pointing out and to clarify that the second game is not an expansion.
No.
So you cannot mix the second game with the first game. You can't mix the cards.
This is a standalone game. This just doesn't. You cannot mix this with Machi Koro 1. They are separate games. There are expansions available, which I believe work with the first game and only the first game. I think they're called. I think it's Harbour and Millionaire's Row. We haven't had the chance to actually just sort of come around to them and give them a go. But maybe that's something we can touch upon in another episode if you guys are interested in that.
Yeah, so we both recommend this game and we both recommend the first game.
Yeah, I'd say so. I would agree with that. I think they are must-haves on the old board game shelf.
Yes, and if you don't want to fork out 30 quid or however much it costs straight away, then by all means go to a board game cafe and play it there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, look them up. See if there's one in your local area. I think they're becoming more popular.
So that's going to do it for the first ever episode of the Tabletop Podcast. Broadcast. You can follow us on the socials. We are on Instagram at Official Tabletop Podcast, not broadcast. Keenan, do you know which games we're going to be looking at for the next episode?
Yep, I sure do.
That's weird because I don't, and I don't think you do either.
No.
Exactly.
One thing we can promise you is it will be just as insightful as this one.
And that's a Keenan guarantee, so if it isn't, blame him. You've probably found us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, in which case please follow the show so you never miss an episode when it drops into your subscription inbox. And I think that's going to do for this episode. So I've been David.
I've been Keenan.
And you've been listening to the Tabletop Podcast.
The Tabletop Podcast.
The Tabletop Podcast.
We'll work on that.